Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokemon card collecting podcast, featuring David Person, owner of the world's most complete English Pokemon card collection, and Dan Norton, a longtime collector with all the knowledge behind the cards.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Koffee Talks. Yes, it has been a while. David has been very, very busy with real life, but we're back. I'm here, David's here, and our special guest this week we have PeekDatChu. So Peek, how has your recent times in card gaming been? Give us a little breakdown of what you've been up to last week or two.
No, yeah, sure. Appreciate you guys having me on, by the way. I was talking a little bit before stream. It's so exciting to see Koffee Talks growth and what you guys are doing now. I thoroughly look forward to every single episode. So I'm excited to be a part of this with you guys. Yeah, I mean, recently it's been a bit crazy. As I'm sure you guys are aware, Japanese 151 has been just absolutely nuts. So that's really been a big focus here recently, is trying to acquire a lot of sealed cases of that stuff, and it's been anarchy, recently. Anyone who's tried to get cases or loose booster boxes, the prices have fluctuated like 40%, like up and down randomly in the last like week. So it's that's been where a lot of my focus has been here recently. That and just buying, some cheap vintage cards. It seems like vintage is not necessarily on its way down, but there's some deals to be had with all this attention on modern cards right now. So a lot more involved, a lot more buying than I normally do in this short of a period. So it's been good though. It's been exciting. It's kind of invigorated that paying attention to everything, because I feel like if I wait a day, I'm going to miss out on something. So It's been going good.
Yeah, I've had a lot of talk on social medias about Japanese 151, like a big reprint and stuff, and a lot of people hating it because they're saying that all their boxes have gone down in value, and then loads of people loving it because they're just buying it up. It seems to be it's the hot topic for discussion lately, I think. Is it a set you're trying to collect, or is it something where you're just picking up the sealed boxes and trying to hold on to them long term?
So I'm doing something a little different than I have in the past. I've never been one to really go after sealed product ever. It's just never been something that I've liked because I can't really hold on to it long enough. I always want to open it or rip it. Even when 151 English came out, I bought a bunch of the booster bundles, and Best Buy just kept restocking them. And I would get them and I go, man, this might be a good thing to hold on to. And that lasted about 24 hours, if that. And I'm already opening them up, and because it's such a fun set to open. Yeah. With Japanese 151, I've been buying a lot of the singles recently. Not necessarily to collect. I mean, there's just so much of a monetary gain in this set. I mean, there's 3 or 4 different ways you can really make a lot of money back and make a lot of money opening it. So that's been something that I've recently been doing, is buying a lot of the singles. But this particular thing, I went out and bought as many cases as I could really get my hands on. Those are going to be ones that get stored away. It's the first time I've really dove in and done this, but honestly, and maybe a spicy take here, I don't know, but I think it might be one of, if not the best Pokemon set ever released. And just from everything I've looked at, I absolutely love the set. It is so much fun to open. And to my knowledge, the first one you can actually open all 151 of the original, which I'm a classic Pokemon boomer. You asked me Gen 3, I'm like, I have no idea almost at this point. So it's been a lot of fun. But yeah, the sealed product is strictly just to sit on for maybe a year, kind of see what it does. And then if I'm able to make money back, I'll definitely have fun opening it either way.
Nice.
This is what I love about this podcast, is if Dan drives the car into the drive-in and the movie's about to start on the drive-in theater screen, which, you guys, Colt, your age, you don't even know what the heck I'm talking about. But we've had a whole commentary from you. Nobody knows who you are, okay? So that's the thing that gets me. It's like, who's the guy? PeekDatChu, PeekDatChu. Is that anywhere correct?
That is exactly spot on, Dave.
Okay,
nice.
So who are you? I mean, what are you? We got a guy on. His name is PeekDatChu. Dan starts asking him questions. What are you doing? You bought all this 151 Japanese. It's the best set in the world. And people are going, who is this guy? What is this guy? The guy is this the guy behind the Wizard of Oz tavern back there, and he's running the whole world? Peek, Colt,
yes, sir.
Whatever your real name is, and I'm not going to divulge it because I get in trouble for doing that. What do you do? Who are you? Will you tell us something about you in this hobby? Because Dan has determined that the entire world knows how you are. And he doesn't realize that we only have like 14 people to watch the podcast in and of itself. So how about just a quick introduction about who you are. Can we do that?
Sure, I would love that. So, yeah, I'm PeekDatChu. I'm on Instagram, YouTube. I have been in the hobby for, gosh, I think this is like year number 5 or 6 or something, which is even, it feels like 6 months. Like it's crazy to see. But yeah, I started collecting as a kid. I was a '90s kid and grew up with Pokemon in the first boom, I guess, because now I think it's more popular than it's ever been. Uh, and yeah, I'm a buyer, collector, seller. Do a little bit of YouTube content. Most of my stuff is on Instagram, but I like to do interviews with guests and stuff like that. Dave, you and I know each other, very well at this point. I mean, we've talked for years now. Dan, I know I've been a huge fan of your channel, and you're one of my favorite people because I love. I think you and probably Jake Pokenomics are the two people who have probably the biggest assortment of random TCGs and CCGs out of anybody. So if there's anything niche, that was what really attracted me to follow your stuff. But I digress. I'm a big fan of the community, involved in it, and just another guy who loves shiny cardboard and takes it to a degree that is a lot more serious than the mass population of the world. So I would say that's probably my best description.
And what do you do as far as, your involvement? So Dan alluded to, are you collecting? Are you selling? Is it full-time? Is it part-time? Is it mainly English versus Japanese? Is 151 more the exception? Talk about some of that.
Yeah, so I do have I have an LLC, I have a business, so I do buy and sell on a higher degree than someone who just casually 1099s on eBay. So I do have a business that I do. I broker cards for a group of people as well, where they have a massive amount of collection they need to move. So I broker a little bit of private deals and things like that. As far as myself, I definitely am a collector. That is something that primarily, it seems like I really focus on Japanese promos because that's what I grew up looking at on dial-up way back in the day. I know, Dave, you always think I'm like 12 years old at this point, but I did grow up on dial-up, which is good.
Good.
So looking that stuff up and buying a lot of vintage promos. So any of the Japanese like ANA promos were some of my favorites. The JR Stamp Rally promos. Anything that was really hard, you had to do something to get the promo. That's what I really like. So those are the things I buy and I collect. But as far as anything modern, for the most part, it's really just a means to fund my vintage collection and then obviously make some money on the side. So that's really, I do a little bit of all of it, but I think, if you asked me a few years ago, it was sort of taboo to say like, oh, you're making money in this hobby, you're buying to flip. But now I've pretty much accepted the fact that to afford some of the vintage cards that I want, I kind of have to do that. So it isn't full time. It is something that I have a career myself, like professionally, but Pokemon has just been not only just with the community, but a very, very fun way to make money to then engage even more. And I guess that's probably the best way that I would say I'd describe it.
And how have you made most of your contacts? How have you grown your personality, so to speak, in the hobby over these last 4 or 5 years?
That's a really good question. One of the things that I've told a lot of people, because I do on my YouTube channel that I have. I just had Charlie Herlocker, Jim at Pokemon, and Leonhardt on a live stream, which Leonhardt is someone who never does any sort of live streams or anything like that. And that was the big question. Like, how did you do that? He's got 2 million subscribers. Your YouTube channel has like 400, or I don't even know the number exactly. But, I think just being authentic, engaged, and really building these relationships on a personal level without a transactional future in mind, I think has really allowed me to have a lot of connections, in this hobby. There's relationships that have started with transactional, but I've never let it end there. And I've never, if I can help it, I never started there because I don't want people to think that I'm just talking to them because they're either they've got a lot of clout or, hey, you've got a lot of cards that I want or anything like that. I see a collection I like, I talk to you about it genuinely. And that's something that I think, when you're authentic in this hobby, which is, unfortunately with the amount of people, and it's very hard to find a lot of authentic people, it's so refreshing to be able to just talk with people about the hobby and keep it at its core. Like we both like the same thing. So that's how I think it's really, I've gotten to the point where I have a lot of connections, a lot of good friends I've made in this hobby, literally starting from zero. And I tell so many people, like, just DM anybody. There's so many people I see that will post like very cool stuff, very niche things. And I'm like, this is amazing, man. Just wanted to take time out of my day and tell you, like, I love the stuff that you're collecting. Like, I'd never even heard of this. Like, I'm looking this up now. just keeping that organic interest and that organic friendship and conversation over something that we all really love is what I would say. If there's any quote unquote success in some sort of social connection circle, that's what it's come from. It's just staying genuinely authentic.
That's great advice. You spoke about, so you're doing the last one you did, or when you're talking about this on YouTube, what is the name? So if anybody wants to go look for that or that interview, or follow you there, how is that referred to? Is it referred to as PeekDatChu on?
So PeekDatChu, yep, that's it. I did I was really into a little bit more of YouTube content. I know last year primarily I had a episodic series that I did called Collector Showcase. It was, I think, 10 or 12 episodes that I did. Maybe not even that many. It's been so long I can't even remember. But had a lot of guests and really did about an hour to hour and a half long interviews, usually with two guests, where it was really just me finding collectors that I'd built relationships with that. Some, had big names. I know Rusty, TCA Gaming, were all fans of him. Him and Charlie were kind of the finale of that. But there were other people. The one that I always get asked about is this person named Blastoids Kid. His name's John. He was a competitor and won the Tropical Mega Battle in 2002, and just one of the coolest episodes ever because no one had heard of this guy. I had saw him because he posted, I think he had something like 70 followers or something, but he posted the Tropical Mega Battle invitation and then some of the clothing and stuff like that. And immediately I was like, super cool. Do you know the competitor? Like, how did you find this stuff? Like, I never see this stuff posted. He was like, oh, it was me. And then I started seeing these old vintage photos of him as a kid and found out that he had this whole dynasty with his family where him and his brothers just won all of these crazy tournaments. And so really the goal of it was to showcase these collectors that people may not even be aware of. And most people were, and especially him. I mean, he was one that nobody really knew who he was. But once he came on and started showing like all the stuff that he had from as a kid, I don't know. It's like when I saw it, I wanted to kind of share that same feeling of excitement and like fire. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this stuff. So that's where the bulk of my content, really was put out. Now I do just kind of occasional live streams, maybe once a month, maybe a little bit more often. When I feel like there's something relevant, happening in our market or hobby, and I want to hear certain people's opinions. So this last one I just recently did, Lee has always been a really great guy. I've always had a lot of good dialogue with him over the course of the last couple of years. Never asked him to do anything. And, I was like, hey, can I steal you, next Saturday? I've got a couple other guys who are coming on. It was about the PSA eBay Vault acquisition. And I was like, I really want to know what you have to say about that, because him being the founder of Rare Candy, running a business, all of them kind of had a unique perspective. So I try to take basically the content that I want to see and I just present it because no one else is doing it. So I'm like, let's get these guys together and like, let's have a fun conversation that the hobby can just have. It's never been about like views, subscribers. It's just, what do I want to see? I'm going to try and make it happen if it's not out there. So very long-winded answer, but PeekDatChu on YouTube. Sorry.
Yeah.
I will say all of your stuff is going to be linked in like the description and show notes and everything for the episode, so people can go there and find all your Instagram, your YouTube, anything else you want us to link to will be down there, so people can find it directly.
Thank you.
Dan, that doesn't matter. Even if you're hacked and you lose everything, it's still going to be linked forever in the description somewhere.
Yeah. That's the
Wayback Machine, right?
Too soon, Dan. Too soon. Sorry. For those of you that aren't aware,
no Wayback Machine for my own personal laptop.
Yes.
Oh, no, I didn't hear this story.
Yeah, that's why the channel's had like kind of a couple of weeks off. Is my laptop got hit with ransomware, and it was like, So it was like, I'm not gonna just send a lot of money to this random Bitcoin wallet. So I've got like. Luckily, all of my recordings are done on my PC rather than my laptop for any videos I record, and then obviously all of the podcast stuff is recorded on Zencaster like we're doing now. So I have all of the raw files. It was just I lost work for videos that I was working on, and then a load of personal spreadsheets and stuff for collection trackers were all gone. I was in the process. I was in the process of moving stuff to Google Sheets, so. Some of the more recent stuff was already moved over, but there's just a few things I want to have to recreate on Google Sheets from scratch now, rather than just getting to copy it over. But it's an important lesson about backing stuff up.
Yeah, redundancy. As someone who's a big spreadsheet Excel thinker, I can't even imagine like doing the offline sheet, conditional format, and all my formulas, and then just one day gone. I don't know what I'd do. I'd probably just break the laptop. But I'm sorry to hear that, man. That's never fun.
And we ended up fighting about it, interestingly, Colt, because Dan, it was a ransomware situation. I'm not familiar with that. I'm certainly familiar in my business with that happening to companies, not to necessarily individuals. And I think they had quoted him something like $150 to do it or whatever it was. And he chose not to. And I was like, why wouldn't you? And of course, it was Bitcoin. So we weren't that familiar with it. And we were trying to figure out how we would do that and get the wallet. And I'm like, why wouldn't you do this? Just because it's only $150, right? They can steal it and you may never get it back. But if they walked away and actually went through and said, okay, he wouldn't have had such trauma and such difficulties coming back up to speed. A no-win circumstance. So, moral and ethical dilemmas and everything. But I kind of threw my hands up because, of course, if it's several $1,000s, it's one thing. But I was sort of thinking, gosh, Dan, maybe you just want to give them a shot and see if they'll actually link you back up. But
if I thought there was a good chance that sending them the money would get my files back, I maybe would have just paid the $150, but I thought it was very, very unlikely. I thought I'd be just sending money to a random Bitcoin wallet and then nothing would happen. And
as someone who watches a lot of those type of I love white hat, black hat videos, and I've watched the DEF CON conferences where it's all these hackers that get together and share all this stuff. Normally they will give you the files back, but the only issue is that's not going to be the first time that attack happens. They're just going to slowly suck you dry. But the good thing is now you've got an experience you can always use as motivation. It's do I need to really back this up? You know what? I'm going to remember this now. There's my redundancy. There's my motivation. So an expensive mistake, but usually it's a one and done, and then you move on from it. So.
And Colt, what about that? Why? How did they get to Dan? How did that? Do you know from your watching of the conferences and any of that stuff? Is any tips you can give anybody to, is it true Macs are more safe than, generally speaking, than the non-Mac or non-Apple type computers? Any comments on that? Because you're so well versed and, and so darn young and smart. I hate you people. Okay, so what do you got to say, Colt? Anything?
Normally their Macs are traditionally safer because there's less people that use them. You have to think what the volume, what are the masses, if you want to get every single person, traditionally they're going to go for older people, right? People who really have no idea what's going on. All of them run Windows computers. They're not using Macs because they don't adopt them. So it's less that Mac is so much more secure. It is, but that's not the core reason. It's because there's such a small percentage of the population who uses it. So realistically, if you download anything and you don't know what it is, that's how they get you. They can even get you through email links. Realistically, there's not really a way to 100% prevent it. There's VPNs and different things like that. There's ways to scan a lot of stuff, but realistically, if they want to get you, they're going to get you. So if it wasn't targeted, it could just be one of those things one click of the mouse. It's whoops, or this got downloaded or something, and you're done. Or email. Email is actually a big one that a lot of people like. It somehow gets into your inbox instead of your junk, and even just reading it. Things could happen, there. But again, there's 1,000 ways to go about it. So you never know. But I just say I keep almost nothing on my computer. I have everything backed up on a network attached storage. And I literally, my browser is just meant for browsing the internet, watching YouTube. So to each their own. Really good advice. Yeah.
It was probably the only random email I remember opening was a dodgy, what turned out to be a dodgy UPS email, which I had to open because I was expecting someone's shipment of cards from Hong Kong. So maybe it was that.
Did you click a link?
No, I just read the email and then I was like, okay, this is clearly not the tracking information I'm actually looking for.
You don't open the stuff that Laura's boyfriend sends her at all, Dan, are you saying?
Where the hell did that come from?
I'm not sure, Dan. I was just
That's a new one.
I was trying to help out any way I can. Colt, what do you do for a living? I want you to talk about what you do for a living, and is there any piece of that? Because I think authenticity is such a huge part of what you said and why you and I bonded early on. What do you do for a living, and how does that fit together?
Yeah, sure. So I am a enterprise account executive. All that really translates to is I sell real estate software to very large organizations. So organizations who manage a lot of real estate properties in the thousands, hundreds of thousands, the software that their tenants pay rent on, and et cetera, pretty much anything that works in their business. I sell that to them. So I've been in sales for 15-ish years, something like that, maybe a little longer. I kind of just stopped counting after 10. But, in order to get into kind of I guess the professional level I am now, there has to be that layer of authenticity because, people think sales, they think slimy car salesman or Glenn Ross. If anybody's ever seen that movie, Always Be Closing, one of my favorites. It's not really like that at the high level. And that's something that I think it's more of a kind of a trust building exercise. And you do that enough that you kind of skip all the BS and kind of become authentic because why waste the time? I'd much rather be very upfront, very direct, very straightforward with people. And I think that's helped me a ton in my professional career. And I've been able to make a lot of connections in the professional world, my personal life because of it. Obviously, the Pokemon community has been great. So yeah, that's what I do now. Done it for a few years now at my current, company, and love it. That's actually before we went live, I was there literally all day at a sales conference. So you guys are bringing my energy up a little bit because this is a lot more fun to do than what I was doing today. But yeah, that's what I do for a living.
And I appreciate you saying we're bringing you up because this is a lot more fun because I've done so many of these with Dan. I completely disagree with you. This is not my definition of fun, but I appreciate it that you're on and giving us a shot and giving Dan one more chance to get this channel rocking again. So Colt, let's go back. I mean, I don't want to miss anything that you said. Let's talk about 151 for a minute because I think that you really made some very strong comments. Pokemon 151 Japanese. So I'm imagining that you're differentiating between Japanese and English as far as when you say the best set ever or whatever.
Very much so. Very much so.
Please tell us why that is that differentiation, and why is this the best set ever?
So the differentiation is really two main things. So one with the Japanese 151, so there's a Mew and a Mewtwo card that the English, in the Japanese, they're actual like chase cards. Like you have to hit them out of booster packs. English made them the promo cards in the 151 Ultra Premium Collection. Mew and Mewtwo are like the big parts of the set. And like that was something that was so disappointing for me because I love Mew. It's my favorite Pokemon. Has been ever since I was a kid because there's one, and that kind of goes with the rarity chase and everything. But in the English side, they just made them promo cards. They printed them into oblivion, and it's same art and everything, but it's just like when you take the chase away, it's like why make it so easy? You just hide it behind a $120 MSRP product and call it a day. It's a pay to play, and I don't like that about that. Versus in Japanese, obviously you have to pull it. The other thing is Japanese do booster boxes. In 151 English, they don't do booster boxes. They just do booster bundles. So you buy the little bundles that have 6 packs in them and you go from there. I like the idea of booster boxes. I don't have to go out and buy multiple of a single SKU. I can just get one box and, hey, I've got 20 packs. The biggest thing, and this is something that I think really bought me into the set and made me absolutely love it, is they have the Master Ball reverse hollows. So basically there's reverse hollows with a Master Ball instead of like a Pokeball. And I don't even think, Dan, you might know this too. I don't know if they really announced that as part of the set. I think people just kind of had to figure that out. Am I wrong on that?
No, I think you're right. I think the first time that we heard about it is like when the people who get the boxes slightly early started opening them and then started actually noticing them, like the leaks that normally come a week or two before the set. I don't think, as far as I know, there was no big announcement of, oh, we're doing this. It was a cool little thing for people to find when they actually started seeing the cards in person.
Yeah, I love that. I love that sort of Easter egg. Like people have to actually pay attention to it. And so it just created almost like a new sort of rarity chase in there for cards that in Pokemon traditionally that you're not going to see like a chase card Metapod or anything, right? Like, being able to put a Master Ball in something like that or a Caterpie and like have me actually be very excited to hit it because it's a Master Ball reverse hollow. I was like, that's amazing. Like you haven't changed the rarity tier. Reverse hollows are always just, hey, let's throw it in the bulk pile. But now it gives me a reason not only for, the full arts or the alt arts, the EXs. Now I also have Master Ball reverse hollows. So the Japanese set, Dave, kind of your question, the Japanese have Master Balls. English does not. They don't have that at all. And it's just, again, it was just kind of a nail in the coffin for this. I'm like, the actual set releases, the Japanese set releases are just so much more superior now to English when it comes to like modern product. It's just, they just think about these things more. And I don't know if it's necessarily a purposeful thing or they prevent them from being able to put that stuff in English. Dan, you might be able to speak that a little bit better than I can, but those are really the main differences between the Japanese and the English one.
And
as far as best
rarity, what is the rarity of the Master Balls? Because I've seen things that indicate like to put together an entire set of Master Ball reverse hollows is supposed to
hard.
be really difficult, right?
One per box.
Yeah.
Dan, I think that's what I've heard, right?
Yeah, so it's like, so David, same as English, each pack is going to have a reverse hollow, but out of the whole box, one reverse hollow will be Master Ball, and then it's like 165 card set, including the trainers, but obviously the EXs don't have them, so it's about, I think, 150 different cards have the Master Ball. So if you are actually opening, it's about 150 boxes would be one set of Master Ball reverses.
Wow. Have you ever
seen... And that's 20 packs.
Yeah, 20 packs.
Have either one of you ever seen a full Master Ball set for sale?
I have on eBay. I've seen maybe one or two, but I can't remember. The prices were like $6,000 or something, so I just kept scrolling. But, obviously, I mean, that's amazing they were able to do it. My thought is it's probably just people who obviously have distribution in Japan who just ripped as much as they could and put it together. Because, I mean, that's a great, moneymaker for them, obviously. But as far as just a casual collector... Too. Oh, sure. Yeah. Get me to click on the page and go see what they've got. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like that's going to be a thing that people are going to be looking for either on eBay. Like they're not going to buy it. They're not going to pay that much, but people are going to want to see it, see the pictures of the set in person together. It's a great thing for the store to have that.
Yeah. And realistically, I mean, the way that you would get that is truly by buying the singles. Like it would make no sense to do that buying boxes. And I mean, because a lot of the Master Balls, I mean, really the only expensive ones that I've seen, I say expensive, that's obviously subjective, but like the PeekDatChu Master Ball is like, I still can't wrap my brain around like why it's so expensive, but that seems to be the one that people just decided they want. I think raw is maybe $350 or something. I don't even know what a 10 sells for. I don't even look at the sold listings at this point because I keep going. They're like, let's do a 7-day auction and we're going to start the bidding at 280. And I'm like, no, like stop, but I know that's the big chase, but you could probably, 150 cards. I mean, you could probably put together a master set if I had to guess for maybe 2,000 or less if you bought singles only, if you wanted to. And again, my math could be way off. So chat, let me know comments but I think that would probably be a realistic amount. If you just went and bought individual singles for roughly 150 cards, I think that's probably what it would take.
And yeah, I think a lot of the less popular Pokemon and the trainers and stuff, I think are just in the like $5 range or potentially even less for some of those Master Balls. I think there's a few that people really just don't want, and it's only a very small handful that are like where the Master Ball card is more expensive than what a box would be.
You know what's interesting though, and this is something I have noticed, just kind of a nice pro tip for anybody looking at getting into this set. I've been doing this for a while now, but you mentioned the Master Ball trainers. So like there's some that are like, the big balloon or leftovers, which is just an eaten apple, but it's a Master Ball reverse. You can pick those up for maybe, I think they've trickled up a little bit to like $9, $10, something like that. If you're able to grade that in the PSA 10, they sell for $100. I mean, there's some serious value in the grading side of that. And that's again, another thing with, Japanese product, the quality is so much better than English. So, I mean, your likelihood of getting an actual near mint to mint card, pretty high, especially in a new set, because they're just ripping, sleeving, and mailing that stuff out. But, it's not just the popular Pokemon. Obviously, popular Pokemon make a lot, but I mean, I've seen things like there's one, it's called like Snatch or something. And it's just a hand that's like reaching, and that's sold more than, say like a War Turtle Master Ball or something. And that just blew my mind. But I think it's people trying to do these master sets, so there's not as many available because people aren't thinking to grade that stuff. So kind of a pro tip, if anybody's looking to maybe go out and buy some singles, those are probably some good ones to look at because you're not spending $50 just to be able to get something because it's a popular Pokemon. So
trainers as well, there's always the aspect of if people are wanting to play the card in their deck. Like if it's a meta card, I don't think there's very much in terms of Pokemon from 151 that impacted the meta in any way, but there might be a trainer or two, and that's probably something that moved the market a little bit. Like there's gonna be players who want to bling out their deck and be like, okay, if this Master Ball reverse is at $20, they're like, yeah, I'm gonna pay $80 and I'm gonna play a play set of Master Ball reverse in my deck.
I mean, that would be cool. I've got to say.
What's so unfortunate is that we talk about this all the time. Master set collecting is really not a thing anymore. It's so minor.
It's so hard.
Yes. And so in the olden days, in the very vintage days, when that's what everybody did, especially in the beginning of the hobby, its origins, everybody would do that. And so if you were to be strategic, you'd pick up all these cards for $5 and $10 and $15, because if you're staying statistically, the odds are as unlikely you're going to pull that versus Pikachu or anything else. You're just going to store them up and wait for somebody who didn't get their snatch card, and you're going to charge them $50 on a $10 purchase to fill it out when they finally need it. But having just bought my Temporal Forces set, this morning or something, and it was 2,000, and it was 1,500, and it's 1,300, and it's 1,200, and it's now 1,000. Nobody buys them. There's 3 out there, and so you just keep waiting, and things come down, and you're not competing with anyone. You can because no one's building master sets. No one's buying master sets, and so therefore not many people are building them either. So it becomes characters, which is why you get the Pikachu that everybody wants, right?
Well, I think we've said, David, for English sets, 151 has been kind of an anomaly in which for 151, there are people building master sets. There are a lot of people going for the English master set of 151. And we're talking, proper master set. Like, people are chasing the GameStop promos, the EB Games promos. They're wanting that full binder of everything from 151. But yeah, you're totally correct. Obviously, any other sets there's no other set from, I think, probably even Sun and Moon on, where people are really, really chasing the master set. It's just 151 has really hit that nostalgia era for a lot of people. And to be fair, I can see it, obviously, it looks great in a binder, having the 1 through 151 full original Pokedex. I can see why people do it.
And it's affordable too, right? I mean, that's the other thing. It's affordable. An English version master set of 151, you can buy for clearly under $1,000 now. Again, much higher, double that 6 months ago or whatever. So even lower, you could probably get somebody down to $800 easily now. Whereas these master balls change the tone and change the affordability of the Japanese one considerably. So then you start to whittle down folks that have the budget to be able to do that as well.
Well, you also look at, again, booster boxes being available in the Japanese product. I mean, those boxes were going at their peak for $200 just a few months ago, $200 a box, which is insane. And as Dan mentioned earlier, with this reprint that actually still hasn't even gotten here yet, it's coming in this month. But, there was a little bit of a wave two, I guess, let's call it, which is where everybody was buying things up. You were able to get boxes if you were very quick and you had the right connections. I mean, you were getting boxes for 72, 73, a box, even less than that if you were getting a good case price. And, I know that, our market is very volatile. Things will go up and down. But I mean, for a product like that with so much demand, to go from $200 a box and then just sit and somehow go below $70, that's really what made me jump into the sealed products. I'm like, I can't imagine a situation where people don't want this for more than $70. I mean, it's just too fun of a set to open. I mean, like you said, you can master set Japanese. I mean, it's probably going to be a tall mountain to climb, but you've got the reverse master balls to chase. You can even do the Pokeballs if you want to. I mean, if you want a cheap version of it, you just want reverse hollow Pokeballs and just, get that set done. You can. You've got the traditional chases. You've got the Mew, the Mewtwo. It's just, there's so many different ways to engage with that set. And that's where I think the demand has just skyrocketed. And 151 is, its own version of that. But I think you guys are right. I mean, when it comes to specialty sets like this, I would compare it down to like Celebrations, for example. Like, that's another one that people tend to master set like fairly often.
And I don't 50 know 50 cards.
Yeah, exactly. But it's those like kind of one-offs versus like you get a 200 plus card set or however many. That's the thing. It's so hard for me to follow like new sets. They come out with one by the time I find out about the last one. But it's easier and it's more of a concise goal that people can do. But I think with Japanese, like you said, Dave, with having master balls, it's just adding another avenue to collect. And I mean, because you don't even have to master set the entire set. You can just do just the master balls. You can do just the non-master balls. I mean, there's just, the more you open up that you can collect into a set, I think that just widens the demand for the collector, because there are different collectors who care about different things. It's not just everyone getting, hey, I want every single card. Maybe they just want these, or they just want these illustrators. And I'm one of those people who grew up with 151. Like, I can usually name just about all of them if I look at photos, but it's nice to have something kind of really paying homage to the nostalgia and having that original 151 finally all in a single set. Like that's amazing to me.
What so I've got 1,000 questions. I'm just going to dive in all over the board now. I'm throwing darts. Colt, when you do podcasts with various folks, as you said, like Charlie and Gem Mint and Lee and these folks, what have you learned? What, tell us maybe one or two or three lessons or pieces of advice that you have, retained, gleaned from these folks in these conversations that maybe has stuck with you a little bit.
Sure. I mean, just a wealth of knowledge, and those are my most recent guys that I spoke with. But I mean, there's just been so many people. I guess just kind of thinking off the cuff. I know Rusty was one person I was really excited to talk to. We had kind of DM'd a little bit, but that was one of the first times that like him and I had spoken. I have to. The hard thing about running a podcast is, you guys know, it's like if you got a really interesting guest, it's kind of hard to remember to like speak and keep it moving along, because you do have a job. Like, it's hard to not just sit there and listen. And he was one of those guys. Whenever I was asking him about his business and kind of his end goal, I was like, "You got a great, well-oiled machine here. I mean, I think I can't remember how many different sales he had on eBay at that point. It was like 400,000. I mean, it was just an insane number of sales he had on eBay. And I was like, his story of origin and kind of where he was going. One thing that I really wanted to understand was, do you have an end goal? And what's the like, what are you working toward? And he was one of the first people who was like, when I get tired of it, I've got my family and I'm able to just, I can just stop. He was one of those people who's like, I can just turn it off. And that was so nice to hear, because a lot of people say, oh, it's the financial goal, or it's, I want to hire out, or I want to continue just building this business side of it. It was really nice to hear somebody at his level kind of prioritize family and his own personal life. And I guess kind of cutting through the lines with him is like, knowing that it's just fun, for him. And it's like, this isn't my main thing. It's paying for my personal life. So I guess life lesson in that is, he's one of those really humble people who's able to like align his priorities in a way that I absolutely resonate with. So he's one guy that I'll shout him out from the mountaintops, like all the time. One of the best people in this whole hobby. Someone like, I'll just say like Charlie Herlocker. I think he's one of the probably most like high level thinkers when it comes to like the way the businesses that are involved in our hobby navigate. So things like the PSA eBay vault stuff, like the way he was talking about how during our podcast that instead of instead of PSA attempting to like get the vault so they can increase the volume of people who grade with them, which is what on the surface I'm like, yeah, of course, they just want more people to grade with them and they want to dominate the market. He was able to paint a picture that was like, grading is just a one-time transaction for them, and they truly like dominate the grading market. I mean, there's so many leaps and bounds above everybody else. And he was like, what I think they should do if I was consulting them is basically taking the other grading companies once someone grades with them, and then using their vault as kind of the true central medium for all of these graded cards, and elevate the entire grading market and bring awareness to it, because everyone, all boats rise in the high tides, right? Like that was the way he looked at it. And I just never even thought about it that way. So just one thing that he's taught me as I've gotten to know him and spoken with him is just really looking at things in unique, creative ways out of the box, not just following what every open mouth YouTuber is saying, like, this is why they're doing it, and this is why it's that. So thinking a little bit different and taking yourself out of the emotional side of why you think people are doing it, because these companies don't have emotions like, oh no, CGC bad, oh no, BGS bad. No, they're here to make money, and like, what's the best way to get that recurring revenue and doing all that. So that's another one. And then I would say just generally what I've learned from people is I'd love to hear their perspectives on why they continue to do this, because I feel very lucky to have known a lot of people who they're not exclusively financially motivated in doing this. I've met people who have, but the majority of people that I engage in or engage with do this because they actually care about the community. They care about the hobby. They'll talk to anybody. There's no elitism when it comes to like engaging with people. From the people that I engage with, I know it's out there, but just learning to kind of keep yourself humble and realize that, like, we're all just people. Numbers, subscribers, likes don't mean anything. It's just like, hey, do you like the cardboard that I like? Okay, cool. Let's enjoy it. So I think, I probably take more life lessons than I do business lessons, but it's a good mix. So I would say maybe that would be some three that I've enjoyed.
Yeah, no, that's those are great perspectives, and I think that's what we try to get from anybody that we speak to, especially if we're able to get down to the level of true authenticity, which is to try to look below the surface and find the real person in there somewhere, right? And so much of the world today is based on your social media profile and what you're putting out to the public, because of likes and all the rest of it, that it becomes more difficult to decipher through. So. I do want to ask you
How
though.
exhausting, by the way. I don't mean to interrupt you, but how
So
exhausting.
it's
I can't even imagine.
well, so it's completely exhausting and leads me to my next question for you, which is, what do you think about? And I'm not pointing to anyone, content creator. I'm talking more general. What do you think about the drama? So you get these videos and stuff where they really seem overly hyped, like the Pokemon market is done, the Pokemon market is on the rise, and every week it changes. And I had my best week in business and I had my worst week in business. Like you're literally, you've got the kangaroo pouch on their stomach and we're just going along for the ride. Is it how does that, what do you think about that, the thumbnails and all the kind of crazy stuff that's put out there?
It's a really good question, and for anyone listening, watching all of this, I mean, it's so to kind of preface, like I deleted all of my personal social media. The only social media I have is literally just my PeekDatChu Instagram, my YouTube, and stuff like that. I don't actually engage in social media as a personal enjoyment or anything like that. The thing is, with everything that's put out, and I've had conversations with some of those types of people, some of those types of headlines, YouTubers, creators, very private conversations that I won't name anybody, but it's every single bit of it is meant to feed the algorithm. All of it is meant to get views and likes and comments. It's rage bait, and this is just kind of the world we live in. And best, sure, they may be real numbers. Best week in business, here's what it was. Worst week in business, here's what it was. It's all to drive interactions that then drive you to third-party websites, which are usually filled with products that they have. Like it's, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. I mean, I you can argue the moral high ground on that, but I'm just saying in general, like it's a business, and people have to understand, like these are not the overwhelming majority of these channels that get so much traffic. It's not meant. This is not who they really are as people. Because I've met a lot of these people, and it's a little bit surreal to kind of have a conversation and realize like, oh, you're a completely different human. You're an actual person. And I think once you realize like that it's a business, it's a performance, it's a dance, that's all it is to really get you to say, hey, don't forget about me. That's what it is. At the end of the day, with the market going down, the market going up, I mean, guys, like Pokemon's not going anywhere. Like I think we are probably at the highest popularity level we possibly could. And I talked about this in a podcast I did maybe a month ago, is that one thing Pokemon is able to do, or has done, is they took everyone who got out of the hobby. Obviously, the pandemic and other things happened, right? They were able to take a prior customer base and merge it with a brand new emerging customer base all at the same time, which is like such a difficult thing for a company to do. Usually people age out of your product and you can only do new customer acquisition. People bought their nostalgia. They keep people engaged. Their timing is great. It's just one of those things that like anyone doing the doom and gloom about Pokemon is just literally like touching the most surface level person who's engaged in this hobby. They're like, oh, Pokemon's doing bad. It's kind of like just turning on a channel and watching it or reading a headline only and then moving on. If you're engaged in this hobby, you know that people are, the amount of transactions and volume of collectors, buyers, sellers, all of that, it's at an all-time high. So I don't really enjoy that type of content. I don't care about YouTuber fights or like people arguing with each other. Like I enjoy a good debate. I love a good discussion. I love people who are battling, quote unquote, but then they get on together and they're like, give me your points. Like that's fun. But with just the clickbait videos, no, I think it's a dance. It's a song and a dance to get your attention, and you should treat it as such.
I read just this about within the last 48 hours. I do a lot of reading, and I would completely turn off from everything in the world were it not for my real job, which is financial investment planning, financial management, et cetera. So with that, you have to be aware of what's going on in the world because it has its impact on markets and what your clients are feeling and the rest of it. So I read incessantly, and one of the most interesting thing was talking about advertising, and what it said was that the average person, and I'm going to go more towards my age group than the two of you, but the average span of attention these days is about something like 47 seconds. That's literally the number. And I say this, Dan, because I do a lot of thinking about the podcast and long format content and things like that. And the actual advertising metrics for younger folks. Now I'm talking about the two of you. Oh, to be young again. Gosh, my liege, get me. Okay, never mind. So, anyways, it's about 8 seconds. It's 8 seconds. So you wonder what it is and how, when I'm thumbing through Facebook and I touch on a Smith machine, a weightlifting machine, because it clicked and got my attention in that 5, 6, 7, 8 second window. And then 2.5 minutes later, I get another company that's now showing me their Smith machine. It really is, it really does get you to begin to understand that you can't fight the momentum. When I talk with clients about, they're like, what's different, David? Why don't we just hold stocks anymore? Like we did 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And I say, because the pace of technological change makes it that a company that was going to double their earnings every 3 years may be out of business 3 years from now. So you have to really be aware. And I do think it's, I'm sure people, I don't know Leon Hart at all, although what I do know of him, I might have to get him in the ring one time and just take a fair shake. But
he's a really, really good human. Like if you get to know, outside of the
right
stuff,
yeah. I don't know him. I'm teasing because I'm saying he bought a card from under me last year. But as a good human being, I don't know that people would know that because they see that hype, right? They see that craziness. And so you do have to navigate through that. And it's no different than somebody's on Facebook and says, can you tell me about the guy that's selling me this card? I need references. And all of a sudden you get 22 people that say, great guy, great guy, great guy. You'd have to have someone probably say that for Leon Hart because he probably has some haters just because of his persona, not because of the person underneath it, right? So I do think attention and attention span and all of this is very interesting in this hobby because there's so many different ways you can go about looking at who you're looking at and trying to decipher if it's valuable or not, or if it caught your attention and why. And then from this side of the table with all three of us as podcast creators and content creators, you have to really be aware of, are we doing a service or are we doing a disservice if we're not shortening things up and letting people really see, a simple question here, Colt, is it better to have one podcast with 3 people on that takes an hour and a half versus one that takes 30 minutes if you could do it in 30 minutes because you think more people might watch and benefit because they won't sit through an hour and a half? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's I think it all depends on what your goal is.
Yeah.
Some people want to get as much social media growth as possible. And I always think, if that's going to be the goal, don't stop there, because what is the point of the social media growth? Like, is it to drive traffic to something else you're working on? Is it to, for mine, the main reason I started engaging in the community, because I was buying and selling Pokemon and just kind of doing things for like 2 years, and I had no social presence. Like no one knew who I was. I was kind of in the Burbank Facebook groups, just casually like posting and stuff, but nothing like, there was no brand or no person or personality behind me, if you can even call it that. But the reason I started engaging is because of things like references or being able to have a recognizable persona or just name that people could go, oh, I've heard of this guy, or okay, I see, these people follow him, or he's done content with these people. So if he's trustworthy, then that's, good enough for me. Like, because it was a lot easier to do that versus like, hey guys, let me get like 5 people that I sold cards to that they're not my friends, but I shipped them something. It's like, hey, can you send this guy a message and tell him I'm good? Or, it was just so much more complex. So that was really the original reason that I started like, doing any sort of content. And then it just grew from the fact of like, wow, now I actually thoroughly enjoy like finding new people. I talk to people every day who, same DMs. I'm sure both of you guys get like, hey, I'm doing this with this card, or I'm doing that. You just are able to build a little bit more of a, almost kind of your own small community of people who trust you with certain cards, or like they want to talk to you about stuff. And there's not a single person who sends me a message on Instagram or anything that I don't reply to or like engage with, and not just an okay or a thumbs up. Like, no, I talk to me. Like, I'll talk to you all day. It may take me a couple days, but I'll get back to you, you know?
But it's important for you to do that, right? So you can keep your end of that communication bargain, right?
Oh, absolutely. And
Just
because
say
my
yes
thing
and
is,
stop. Just stop. I needed just a yes, because my wife's always
yes.
wondering. About 50% of my communiques are from young women, and God bless them. So you see, honey, when you watch this, it's not a part of any scheme or anything. I just need to make sure I'm communicating on a regular basis.
He's
I
got the
have-
beard now, though, so you might need to watch your back. I don't know.
I've seen the metrics of this channel, and there are no young women watching this.
No, it's not. This is you don't understand. Okay. Okay. That's it. Now I'm going to go for the jugular. So you guys might know that recently I did a post on Pokemon Mighty Beans, which are the little jumping beans, okay, from our youth. And that one post,
What do
when
you
I
mean,
showed
our
the entire
youth?
set of beans, what?
What do you mean, our youth?
Well, from my youth. Okay, fair enough.
I love a good clap back, Dan. Good on you.
No, I do. I do think it was from your youth, actually. It was from my adulthood as a parent of young children. So, anyways, 36,000 likes, not views, on that post. And
No
so,
kidding. Wow.
yeah, so I went out to the market since then, and every time anything comes up, I just buy it. So I now have the largest collection of Pokemon Mighty Beans English collection. Oh, that's funny. So I will do whatever it takes to make the young women stay interested in me and stay relevant. And I don't care. My wife's not always happy, but I love her to death. She's a sweet woman, and I still pay for her lifestyle, so all things are good. Okay, I had to put it out there. I'm sorry. I have no business being on a podcast or even being alive at this point. Colt, PeekDatChu, or any other of your anonymous aliases, because you don't have any social media presence, which, by the way, I've discontinued all of mine with my kids. That's the truth, so I can still love them. Here's the question. What do you do? You want to make money, okay? And you might not want to make money,
Sure.
but you're not doing this for no reason at all on the business side. So anybody, if you talk to Dan at Catch 'em All Collectibles or whatever, sealed products, like that's what most of the folks turn to. When I talk to other people that we're going to introduce to the world soon, they're like, you got to buy Lost Origins because this is when it's going to spike and here's where it's going and blah, blah, blah. So I think most of us feel confident that when all the reprints are done, whatever those reprints are, you ultimately can't lose any money, at least from if previous history is indicative of future results, which of course it's not supposed to be allowed to be. So I feel like you're more on the individual card side a lot of the time. Am I right? Am I wrong? And how do you make a decision about where your capital is going to go? It sounds like you don't store as much as other people might for a couple years. You might be flipping more real time. But how do you answer that question for those that are watching?
No, you're spot on. And I will kind of preface, because Dan is a good friend of mine as well. I know you guys had him on. It was an awesome episode. He's a great guy. And one of the, I think I subscribed to him when he had like 200 subs, and his video was like, I quit my job to do Pokemon full time. And that was one of the clicks back in like 2018 where I was like, oh, people take this serious? Like, what? Let me watch this. Oh, he's got spreadsheets. All right, I'm in. Dan is an interesting case because of the Dan Catch 'em All Collectibles. Because the amount of capital that he is dealing in is exponentially more than the average person. So whenever people hear, oh, Dan's buying a bunch of sealed, I need to go do that. Just know that Dan has so many different revenue streams that he is doing this. And his was really like, and he said this in his videos, he needs somewhere to park this capital. Like, that's the thing, because the money is just sitting, because he's buying so much and he's selling so much. He's got one of the best problems in America ever. He's got a capital problem. Like, he's like, I'm too liquid here. I've got too much cash sitting around. So it is smart for him to treat it as a stock portfolio. He needs to diversify in something that can, hopefully passively increase in time. He doesn't have to worry about grading companies. He doesn't have to worry about leveraging himself. Like, hey, I'm going to park this here and see what happens. So with me, to kind of get your question, it's not that I'm bearish on sealed product and hoarding sealed product, because as you said, historically, that's been great. That's actually been really smart. I've seen a lot of like graphs and stuff. People have even compared it to like the S&P and stuff, and which I think is hilarious. But hey, it's data. I'll look at any chart just about if it makes sense. But my thing is that I'm not outside of like a specialty set. So like celebrations, I went really heavy in, not to store. Well, I'll say I did buy the ultra premium collection. I bought like 6 of those, and then I sold them back into the market and doubled my money. And I was like, hey, all right, good play. I'm good. Like that's fine. Um, Outside of specialty sets, it's very hard for me because I don't follow a lot of the modern sets and modern releases. Plus, when you start getting outside of the original 151, this is my Pokey Boomer coming out here. I don't know what people like. Like outside of like a Rayquaza, a Lugia, like something crazy like legendary Pokemon. I don't know what people want. I don't even know what a lot of the Pokemon are. So when I see sets get released, or when they're going out of Pokemon Center, I know everybody talked about that. I'm not cut. The amount that I would need to buy to feel like I've got a good position is more capital that I would. I just don't like tying it up for as long as I would need to because there's no. I mean, it may take 3 years. I think Pokemon Center just released Vivid Voltage on their website today or something, which is I don't even know how old that set is. It seems like fairly old, but my thing is I just have a lot better luck finding individual cards, looking at condition, grading it, and getting it back within, say, like 20, 30 days. And then maybe I've got 100% gain on it. I'm happy to take the quick money because then I can just take all of that and put it right back into more. And I can scale that side of my business a lot quicker than I can just parking my money in boxes. Not to mention, I have a wife who could not care less about Pokemon cards or I don't think she's gonna say I can say anything on this podcast. She'll never watch any of my content. Just doesn't care. Not a nerd bone in her body. So like, if I start stacking up and storing stuff, she's gonna go, "What the hell are you doing? What is this?" So it's there's personal motivation, but more importantly, it's a capital motivation. I can turn my capital around and increase it quicker versus just sitting on stuff. And I think personally, just from my experience in my own buying and selling, I'm able to make more money because I just have more of an eye for what I'm looking for in the other stuff.
Well, and that's, I mean, there's so much wisdom in all of that. I mean, there's different business models, right? You go to a restaurant and you eat the high end steak, a huge margin, but they maybe don't go through as many people as the pizza restaurant that's doing 10 times the volume with smaller margins. And yet, no pizza restaurant I've ever seen almost never goes out of business. So you can have 75 of them in the same city and they're all going to thrive. So I think when you know your business and you know your niche and you specialize in that, you really gain a level of confidence in what you're doing. And there are people that don't have the ability to hold for a long time, like you said, and it becomes a very different, business model when it's just literally buying and selling. It's no different than really any Amazon business where you could be buying inventory from China, bringing it in, selling it, and getting it again. As long as you can acquire that inventory over and over again, you're in good shape. So, and as far as your wife, Dan and his wife don't, Laura, they don't communicate that much. So he doesn't really listen to most of my marital advice. But for those of you listening, you might know I've had pretty decent success in the hobby with no financial incentives whatsoever, right? I have bought set after set. Dan tells me, please go buy this card for $1,500, this champion Hong Kong card that no one will ever want in their entire life being. So you can have one more card that no one else has in your collection. And he's 100% right on all of that. And no matter what I've done with no financial motivations, I've been fortunate to have some successful financial outcomes if things were to be turned over before I pass. And my wife still says, what the heck are you doing? What the heck are you doing? What the heck are you doing? And she was in Sam's Club this last, couple of weeks, and she was in Costco 2 weeks before that. And they had these 151 bundles on the English side in one of them. And they had, this last time was these $33 boxes with 14 packs in them that people probably know about. And she's like, should I buy these? And I'm like, yeah, buy. And what I do, Colt, I don't go to you because you don't do these things, but I'll throw a message out to somebody like a Catch 'em All or whatever, like Dan, and I'll say, $2.40 a pack for all these packs in the box. Do you think that's a good deal? He goes, buy them all. So then the red phone goes out. I go, honey, buy the whole thing. And then of course you say that, and then everybody's mad, right? Because little Johnny didn't get his pack at Costco or Sam's, but it was a closeout. how long were they sitting there before nobody did, right? I mean, it goes from 33 to 30 and they're on sale and there's 120 boxes, but little Johnny, when he found out, was going to get them or something. So you can't win. But I do think having a network of support folks like I'm fortunate to have with you and Dan Norton and Dan at Catch 'em All and others is huge, because it really does help you in those spur of the moment type situations when you're like, do you think I should do this or not kind of thing, and you have confidence in those people for their expertise as well.
Well, and there's no way to know. That's the thing with Pokemon is there's no way to know everything. Like there's really too much. Like Dan, I'm sure you're probably the closest thing to an encyclopedia when it comes to Pokemon. Like probably out of anybody that I would know. But there's so many variants of things, and I think it's hard if you only know a little bit about a lot of Pokemon. I think it's really smart to kind of just hone in your focus. I think that helps you as a collector, as a buyer, a seller, however you engage in it. Just have a niche or just focus on one thing that you know really, really well. Mine was Worlds cards. That was one thing when I first came back in and I started looking around. I was like, oh, cool, I'll just go on eBay and buy these. And lo and behold, there was no listings. Like there's no sold. There's none available. I go, well, I know they exist. But then I go down the rabbit hole of like, reading into E4 forums and like I'm like 8 or 9 pages deep and I'm just researching and then I'm like, okay, I know these cards now. I know what I'm looking for. And I get questions like multiple times a week of like, hey, what's this? Or I saw this, or what should I say? I mean, and Dave, you'll obviously appreciate this, but like the amount of 2004 like quarterfinalist cards and like all these other ones that are just appearing from people that I don't follow, I don't know who they are, but they'll go, hey, what about this? Like, is this like, what should I sell this for? I'm like, it's just funny. I just always think to myself, I'm like, how do these people find me? Like, how do they know like I'm the world's guy that they can ask these questions to? And even Z&G, great business, by the way, eBay, massive. If anybody's even remotely engaged, they probably know who they are. Z&G Emporium. But I remember he messaged me on Discord and said, hey, I've got this huge auction block of all these Worlds cards. And it was like '05 to I think like 2014 or something. And basically all stamps. Like a couple champs were missing and finalists, but for the most part, all the major ones. And I remember he was like, what do you think this is going to finish at? I was like, okay, this will be fun, because there weren't like sales for a lot of these. And I was like, I named them all out. I think I was off by like $1,500 or something. And this was like a $42,000 auction block or something. And I was like, okay, I'm not full of S, like I was like, okay, I'm actually following this stuff. But I digress. I just think that you're exactly right. Like having a community that you can lean on for people who specialize in certain things and you kind of are aware of that is not even just like beneficial, but like essential in order to like continue moving in this hobby the way it is, because it's so hard to navigate. Like there's too much to know. Like you really can't know. So
I found that out interesting.
I'm curious real quick. I'm curious on your thoughts, Dan. I feel like you're not talking. I want to bring you into the conversation. What do you think on that?
Well, I was gonna say this. I was actually gonna say the same exact thing, Dan. In recent times, as we've had to go down the rabbit holes to fill my stuff in my collection, I felt like there's been more times than ever that you've said, I didn't know that, or I didn't realize that was out there or stuff. So yeah, what are your comments?
Yeah, I mean, keeping track of that stuff, I will say obviously my niche is English cards. Like that's my thing. That's where, what I know about variants and stuff for English, there's no way I know anything close to that for other languages. But I think what it is, David, is just there's so much being released now in terms of variants for English, and a lot of stuff is getting released without any sort of fanfare. The big thing is professor promos right now, that I'm just finding out about, where I'm speaking to people and it's like, oh yeah, we did release this thing, but it was like 50 professors worldwide got it, and they were just mailed specifically to these 50 people.
Can you say what these are? I've never heard this before, but I'm already intrigued.
Yeah, so I'll put some pictures on the screen, but I have some here because we just bought some for David. There's a couple of copies of a couple of different versions of the card Judge. There's one from Fusion Strike and one from Scarlet Violet that have the Professor logo on them, and they just basically never show up anywhere, because the one from Fusion Strike it was sent out, it was mailed out to judges who contributed to the Professor University, which is like a website, an online portal with where people like professors can make videos and talk about different aspects of being a professor, running tournaments, that kind of stuff. And it was
How
just
cool.
if people, yeah, it's a really cool thing, and it's just if they contributed videos to this website, they got mailed this card. So there was no official discussion of it. There was, and it was just kind of, it wasn't like a big fanfare the same way that we've looked at the full art professor set. You might have seen the plaque that some like 10 professors a year or something got it, where it's 8 full art supporters with the professor logo on. That was like special enough that those professors were posting it on social media everywhere. But this judge like slipped under the radar. And then there's another copy of Judge the Scarlet Violet one. This was every regional coordinator was sent, I think, 30 or 40 copies. Regional coordinators are like the next level up from judging. They oversee like areas. So there's, I think, 3 or 4 regional coordinators in the US and then others in different countries around the world. And they just got it of like, oh, you can give these out however you feel to judges in your area. And it's stuff like that where it just will so fly under the radar, where I'll just be talking to people and like, oh yeah, I got this, and I'm like, oh, cool, but this has been out for 6 months, and I didn't know about it because just no one is talking about it. That's the kind of thing where nowadays it's just so hard to keep track of that kind of stuff. Plus, it seems like we're getting more and more variants that are country exclusive. Like the EB Games stuff from Australia and New Zealand we've got more connections down there now, but it was harder to track. The 4 countries in Asia that release English language, like this Chen Pao that I just showed off from Hong Kong, like Hong Kong, Singapore, the Philippines, and Malaysia have their own set of English cards that you can only get in those countries. That's
Sorry, Dave.
Boy, exactly. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your empathy. Thank you, because I'm
doing
sorry
all right
too,
with
as
those.
is my pocketbook.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all that kind of stuff. It's just that there's no, like, Pokemon aren't talking about it. Like I've talked about this on the podcast a little bit more, about how much more expensive it would be if David was trying to do this for Magic rather than Pokemon, where it was like if he was trying to get every variant of every Magic card ever released, like even just starting from now, he'd be spending so much more money, but it would be so much easier to do. Because when Magic makes variants of cards or they make promos, they always announce it. It's always
documented somewhere.
Yeah, there's always somewhere, like even when it's like English language cards that are only released in Japan or something, which there have been recently, there are articles about it. Like, Wizards' website tells you that this stuff's coming. There's people on social media, like people who work alongside Wizards, are doing announcements and stuff for it. It's always out there. So even though it would be so many more cards and so much more money, it would be a lot easier to do because we'd be knowing what to look for as it's coming out. And it's so much easier trying to get variants and these crazy things as they're coming out than trying to go back to something that was released a year and a half ago and try and find out like which professors got this thing a year and a half ago.
Well, talk about a prime example too. I mean, David, what you're talking about, having the community, I would have no idea that was a thing without Dan just telling me, like I'm not going to see people post that. And that's not going to be, I mean, I might, but like probably pretty rare for that to happen. Really, unless it was you, Dan, probably posting it. Yeah. But I would never have any idea about that. And I think a lot of people feel that same way about like, especially vintage Japanese promos, because people have, if it doesn't have a Pokemon on it, they're like, what's a Miracle Diamond? What's a Wonder Platinum, whatever, like what is this big chain that I'm looking at? It's like stuff like that, like being able to like kind of have that story to reference like that, I can just kind of remember. But like if you were like, what about the exclusive Professor English promos that were sent out, I would go, wait, we have exclusive English promos? Like that's probably my next question I would end up asking. Yeah. So I think it's amazing to have a circle of people you can rely on for that stuff.
Well, and then this goes to this whole idea of Pokemon being smart in their marketing. A lot of people think they're very smart. A lot of people think they don't have a clue what they're doing. I honestly don't know. I just know that because of the myriad of different products, countries, sets, series, tournaments, that there is either too much for everyone to try and do it all, or people do not know that there is stuff out there. And just like you said, and so the issue with that is, I think back to the trophy cards. And when Dan and I first started pursuing those back, 20 years ago or 18 years ago or whenever, no, I didn't know what they were. I had to learn the hard way financially. And then it took years for people to even understand, because of the limited number, what they were and that they were out there. And everybody said they would never be anything because nobody would want them, because nobody knew what they were, kind of thing. It took years for this, and this hobby really still in its infancy when you think about long-term cardboard hobbies. I don't know, I do think it's different. There was so much less then. And these days, I think there's so much more. That's why I joke and I say, so we buy a Hong Kong champion card or whatever. There's Dan will tell you, but there's one of them or five of them or zero of them or two of them. There's none of them. There's nothing. But nobody cares, because either they don't know, or they're not going to own it, or they don't want to own it, or they've got 10 million other things they're looking at. So it's a good and a bad. From a financial standpoint, I don't buy for financial reasons, so that doesn't matter to me. I'm buying to fill a hole in a collection and try to keep this museum-like activity going on. But I do want to smack myself 14 times in the face and say, why didn't I buy some more sealed product that I knew was actually going to go up, because everybody else was following the herd of getting that down the road. I love that Pokemon, though, and we always say this, and you alluded to it earlier when you were talking about the 151 Japanese set Colt, and you said, you know what, somebody could buy the SIRs, somebody could buy the Master Balls, you get to collect what you want, and there's enough variety in all of these different things for people to pick out exactly what that is, even if it's just a single character in every one of those cards that ever came out, for everybody to find a niche, which is why so many people love Pokemon.
I did talk a little bit on my other podcast this week as well, my more generic TCG podcast that I do on Spotify.
You have another podcast, you podcast cheater.
Yeah.
When were you going to tell me that?
Loads of times. Told you so many times.
All right, I might have forgotten. I've got the early onset dementia. My apologies.
Yeah, I was talking with Jordan about it, because we were talking about new releases and stuff, that Magic and we were talking about Alpha Clashes and other card games just started coming out that Jordan's kind of into. And it seems like, I said, for probably about the last at least 5, maybe closer to 10 years, every TCG, whether they were existing or whether they're new, they have been operating under the assumption that no one is going to try and collect everything. Because there's no TCG going anymore going, oh, people can collect everything in our game. Like, when you look at how WotC was releasing stuff, it was doable. Like, you could collect the sets, and then there weren't that many promos for WotC, and even the ones that there were, there was no, like, super chase cards, like trophy level cards. But now, and then for the first few years of Nintendo with Pokemon, there was the trophy cards from Worlds were basically it in terms of unobtainable. Like, if obviously now looking back, a lot of the stuff in those EX era sets are really hard to come by, very expensive. But if you were collecting just going along as the stuff was coming out, it wasn't that difficult to put sets together. It wasn't that difficult to pick up the tournament promos. It was only just the trophies and those top cuts from Worlds every year. But now, when you get to it, we're looking at, as I said, all that Professor stuff, and then we've got champion stamped cards from ICs, so we've got more tournaments throughout the year with champion stamped cards. The sets and stuff are obviously a nightmare to collect on their own because of how big they are, and that is just tracking across so many other TCGs. Like Magic are doing the serialized cards. Like, every set now has collector boosters with 10, 20 different serialized cards. There's no one going to be able to do that to keep up with that. Like, someone might be able to focus on a set and say, oh, I love this set, I'm going to get one of each serialized card from this set. But no one can do that for 6 sets a year. They always have to assume that some people are going to collect something that they want, and all TCGs are just doing that. They're opening it up, they're giving way more options for people to be able to collect something. But it's just that, obviously, like we've always said with David, no one coming into Pokemon now could do what David's done. Like, the fact that
Unless they bought David's collection. There's
Right, they have to.
there's no starting from scratch.
But sadly, unfortunately, and I say this in humor, but I don't mean it in humor, and nobody cares. So honestly, that's, because it's sort of ridiculous in the larger scheme of things. I don't know that it would be meaningful to anybody to try to do what I've done. So, I mean, probably if I started all over again, I'd probably say, let's go, pick 2 characters and go get every Pikachu card I could. Right. So, it's just one of those things. It's sort of like saying this argument about, is there something inherently special? And by the way, this is a rhetorical question. Is there something inherently special about Zach Browning, Gem Mint Pokemon, or Charlie Herlocker, or Scott Pratt, or Rusty, other than the fact that we all started early, right? We all started years and years ago in the beginning, but it doesn't mean we necessarily so we carry that beginning torch, but you need new people to keep handing it off to, just like you guys, so that it continues along, right? A little bit of being in the right place at the right time. But yeah, I don't think that nowadays, with so much out there, it really would resonate with people anymore to necessarily try and do that. So
I think it'll definitely be impossible to replicate the legacy that you've now built with this collection. And I think that you've been able to, you really, whether it was intentional or not, knowing you, it wasn't intentional, but right. I think you've truly created something that you are a one of one in this entire space, and you will be forever based on what you've been able to do. And I think that just in itself is something timeless. You will always, I would actually love, and I don't know, I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense that PSA wouldn't do this because you don't grade cards, but I would love to see them do a write-up in the new TCG, PSA magazine, of you. And I don't know if you've ever been approached or anybody's ever mentioned that before, but we all have
who I am. You have to look at the offender lists in the different neighborhoods to actually find me. So other than that, that's the only place I can actually be found. So yeah, nobody knows who I am.
I would so love to see some write-up to bring more attention to what you've built, because there's so many people that I've spoken to that, a lot of them know, especially now, you're Instagram famous at this point. You're a daily poster. You've got all the followers now. So I knew you back in the day now, but so many people, I was like, do you know Dave Person? Do you know his collection? So, and, people would say, I don't think so. I don't know who that is. Does he have a trophy card? I'm like, he has one of every English card. And it's funny to see people's brains kind of start processing it, and they go, what? Huh? I go, every single one. And they're like, how? That's usually the first question, but I get it. It's like, how? I'm like, just watch his stuff. It's amazing, blah, blah. But I guess one thing too, Dan, that you kind of just touched on, and this is somebody I'm sure both you guys have either heard of or it's Jeremy Swolepoke. He's a great guy, good friend of mine in this too. He said something that kind of goes along with what you said, Dan, and the fact of when you got sets, especially vintage stuff, it was you've got the set and you collect a master set, or you just go for the hollows. It was a lot easier. It was a lot more simplistic. One thing that he brought to my attention, this kind of goes, David, when you asked lessons and stuff, and it made me think outside of the box, is so he's really big into autograph cards and stuff like that. That's sketch cards and all of those. And one thing he talked about is people, after they've ripped enough packs and gone after these sets and just open product and just go with the normal set cards, they kind of get bored and they all look for that next level of rarity. And I'm absolutely a product of that as well. It's except, well, I didn't rip a bunch of set cards. I just went, what's the hardest thing I can't find? I'm going to go after that now. But he said, it's nice when you have different ways to collect this stuff and they're harder to get because it keeps your engagement. It's like dangling the carrot. And it's when you talk about serialized cards, it makes sense because why would they want you to collect them all? Because if you can't, and maybe they don't think this meta into it, but I just imagine there's a benefit to having a secondary market where people have to trade, have to interact, have to do that to get these serialized cards or these over here, because it keeps the engagement happening. Kind of goes back to our social media conversation, except it's real life. People have to engage about the product to be able to collect this stuff. There's got to be some sort of, brainstorming whatever in these companies that they think about this, human behavior activity. And it makes sense because if you could just collect it all, that's boring, to be honest. It's a little boring to master set everything. not against you, Dave, because obviously yours is like an insane level. But if you just went after set after set after set, and that's all you went for, I would imagine that would get a little bit more boring after a while, and you'd want something rare or harder to get, or one of these professor variants, like something like that. And
And you're, by the way, you're 100% right. I consider what I do, and Dan knows this for years. It's very boring. This is boring. I get a set, I didn't buy a set this morning, Temporal Forces, because I was excited to buy Temporal Forces. Just being very honest. I bought Temporal Forces because I don't have that set, and I need that set so that Dan can help me figure out which variants need to be attached to it. So it's in a binder and it's queued up and it's waiting for the promos and the staff promos, pre-releases, blah 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 blah. So it is a very, and I don't ever have time in spending so much time and effort and money in going along this path. You start opening binders, and I love when they come in. I thumb through it once. This is a sad story, and it's, I'm not self-pitying, but I thumb through it once and I go, this is so amazing. I love that I own this. It gives you that little hit of dopamine. And then I tuck it away until the variants come in, because there's too much. There's too much to sit and enjoy. There's too much to thumb through. I actually like going through a little bit with a daily post and trying to find something new and creative, but I try. But it is work, and it is boring. And it made me think, when you were saying challenging, when you were talking about challenging, I wondered if once you get stuff that's reasonably challenging in your collection, and you look for that next level, like you said, swole poke or whatever, I just wondered aloud in my head, does grading make the next challenge? So now you
without
have
a
a whole
doubt,
set in nines, and you're like, okay, I guess it's time for tens, right? Because eventually there isn't anything necessarily that much more difficult to obtain.
for sure. I mean, conditional rarity is just another pillar with that. I mean, I do that with Japanese promos. So like with vintage Japanese promos, I collect and actually just hang on to nines for myself, because I'm like, the likelihood of me getting a 10 and, taking this population from 21 to 22 is so unlikely. But, I have it because like, for example, the PeekDatChu on the left, it's a A&A Airlines promo, from 1999. It's one of my favorite PeekDatChu arts of all time. He's winking. He's got balloons. There's a plane in the back. Cool story. I have two of those in a nine. Don't ask me why. I just have two. But that is a card that I still consistently buy raw, because there's a lot available, but like finding a mint version is very difficult. And I think the PSA 10 version is like, I don't know. I think the only ones probably listed are like $2,500 or something, because the pop is so low and they're so hard to grade. But that's the other thing, is like, there's just something about wanting to get like a PSA 10 in that card. I'm like, it's hard. Like, and it's a whole different level of hard, because it's not like, there's so many available. I can spend as much money as I want on getting as many copies as I can, but the likelihood of them being actually meant enough to get a 10 is pretty low. So you're exactly right. I mean, conditional rarity, once you start getting into that makes a difference in just traditionally grading cards. Even in autos, there's a lot of people who will grade the autograph, which I've never understood personally. I just think, you have the autograph, like, hey, hold your pen down a little harder or I'm going to get a 9. Like, it doesn't make sense. But there's people who they pay massive premium for a Gem Mint 10 card and a Gem Mint 10 autograph. And it's like, once you start kind of slicing the pie with this, I just can't see Pokemon ever failing or not having some form of engagement. I mean, if you think about the amount of silos of communities just within this community of what they collect, it's never going anywhere, So that's the fun thing about it, and why I'm so like involved in it still. And most of my hobbies, I usually will leave behind after about 4 years. That's something I've just, my experience, like things I get into, I go really heavy into it for 4 years, and I go, all right, I've kind of had my fun, like I'm done. But Pokemon has done such a good job at keeping the engagement, the community's engaged. People I started talking to 4 or 5 years ago, I just met them in person for the first time this year, and it's like slapping a hug and just reinvigorates that, like, man, this is so awesome that we came together over some shiny cardboard, and I just want to keep doing it, forever. So
The 4-year itch. I'm going to make sure you got to absolutely make sure your wife doesn't watch this. Your 4-year blocks of what you enjoy and go into heavily. So, do you travel? Because I've heard people say that sometimes when you're the type of person who's looking for those A&A cards or whatever, any cards, that you then think, hey, I can find it in a show and I can pick it up and it's ungraded, it's raw, it's beautiful, and I'm going to be able to get a 10 on that. I can physically see that in front of me. A lot of folks make the effort to go to the collecticons or the local card shows to try to pick those up just so they get a chance to handle them themselves. Do you do that at all? Will you go to Worlds? Have you been to any regionals or anything like that?
So my plan this year was to hit a few different collecticons and hopefully go to Worlds, but I'm expecting actually a new baby girl here in August. So all of those plans pretty much got canceled. But so what I do is I go to luckily I live in Dallas, Texas. So we actually this year we have 2 collecticons, which is awesome. That's the only shows that I go to realistically. I used to travel for them. I went to Denver last year, which was a good time. But really the goal of those was to not necessarily go in and be able to find cards to buy. I mean, that's always part of it, but for the most part, it was mainly just to find another way to engage in the community. I have a lot of friends who so many people have gone to Japan in the last 3 months that I know. It's insane that they're out there buying all kinds of stuff, and it looks really fun. But then also in the back of my head, I'm somebody who actually I hate traveling. I hate loading up a suitcase for a long period of time.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. I can't, when I can sit online, zoom in, be able to return something if it doesn't meet conditional rarity usually. And not that I do that almost ever, but if they list it as near mint and I get it and it's a crease, eBay does return, so it's fine.
Right.
It's just too convenient to do it that way because there's no real loss. It's if it comes in and it's not the condition that was promised, then I'll send it back and no harm, no foul. It's good. But at collectons, I do hit a lot of vendors before the general admission doors open, and I'm just hey, I'm here. Let's go ahead and can I buy these Master Balls? Can I buy these Master Balls? That's all I did at Dallas Collecticon. But realistically, I don't think there's really any difference between in person and looking online. Obviously having it in person is great, but I think at this point the scans are so good that people are putting out, especially on Japanese stores that sell on eBay, that I can see everything that I need, at that point.
That's good. Let's see, I had one more question. Let's see what I was going to ask you. Your own collection. You mentioned the ANA Pikachus and the neat art and stuff. What is your favorite card or two of your own stuff that you don't resale? When you pick it up and it gives you not just a hit of dopamine, but 12 hits of dopamine, just either not seeing it or knowing that you own it one way or the other.
I would say, for sure, my Mount Fuji Pikachus. So that's the 97 JR Stamp Rally, the Japan Railway Stamp Rally promo. I have graded so many of those to try and get a 10. I probably graded that card more than any other Pikachu promo ever that I've personally done. I have a 9, an 8, and I think I've got 3 or 4 raw copies because they just wouldn't meet the conditional rarity. And I'm I'm not going to sell these. I'll throw them in a binder and I'll look at them because I think it's got Mount Fuji in the background. It's a beautiful card and my all-time favorite Pikachu promo ever outside of the number 3, 97 trophy. But that's definitely one of them. I do also have, there's a couple of kind of oddball things that I have. I've got an original, this is actually outside of Pokemon. I guess I'll tell you this one, then I'll keep it with Pokemon. But I have an original VHS of The Thing, the movie The Thing. I love Kurt Russell, all Kurt Russell, and The Thing is one of my all-time favorite movies. So I have an original rainbow print variant of this VHS, which is a super hard tape to find, that I found in an auction randomly, and that's one that I actually still pull out, and I'm this is so cool. This is version 1, which I won't even get into the VHS talk, but that's another thing I've graded and bought and sold a little bit.
That was a previous 4-year block.
Yeah, right. I occasionally look at it, but yeah, I don't dabble too much more into it now. I kind of got the grails that I wanted, but definitely the Mount Fuji Pikachu. The ANA Pikachu on the left is another one that I've got multiple of the same grade, and anytime that happens and I start going, oh wow, I've got 2 of these, I really like the card. And then honestly, to be completely transparent, the main thing that I look at the most out of my collection, where I actually will take the binder out and look through it, is there's a 2004 Worlds binder that Jeremy Swolpoke, who we talked about earlier, he gave me. And I'm still trying to build this out and get more of these, and I never really think about it at events because I'm not posting on socials. I'm trying to live in the moment. Is I've got probably 8 cards, and it's people that I have engaged with in this hobby like a lot, that I've had them like sign or draw me like a little sketch on whatever their favorite Pokemon was. Like, it can just be like a regular common card. I love flipping through that because that's where I get the most memories from. I'm like, oh, there's, Zach Jim Man, or oh, there's Dan, there's his first business card. Like, that's how weird it gets. But I'm like, I love flipping through that because, like, when I'm done with this hobby, whatever that is, that binder will remind me of all the people and the friendships and all of that I made. So that is honestly, like, not even like trying to be cheesy, but that's what I look at the most out of everything that I've got. So yeah,
that's really cool. I do have to pin you because I think you said Mew was your favorite.
For sure.
So what about the favorite Mew card? Is it the JR, the one that one, or is there one that's,
as far as what I own? Yes, but my all-time favorite Mew card is the 7,000 point play promo Mew. He's like got floating rocks around him. It's the coolest looking Mew art I've ever seen. Like, don't come at me with the shining Mew comments in here, guys. Like, I don't want to hear it. Like, people who watch this back, like, the 7,000 point play Mew is like my all-time favorite Mew art, promo, all the above. It's a beautiful, beautiful card.
Wow, that's very cool. Very cool. I love your perspective is just amazing. You sense the authenticity and the humility. So I really appreciate that.
Hey everyone, it's just Dan from the future here while doing the edit. Just let you know that we're pretty much done with talking about Pokemon and card collecting for the rest of this episode. Mainly what we're talking about from here on out is the topic of mental health. We get a little bit into it. So we just want to let you guys know, in case people didn't really want to talk about that or didn't really want to listen to that kind of thing. We're obviously really happy for people to listen. We think it's a very good and interesting conversation, but we know it's not what some people are going to want to be listening to when they've just stuck on a Pokemon podcast to listen to in the background or something. So if you decide to stop listening here, that is totally fine. And of course, go and check out PeekDatChu on all of his socials. Everything is linked in the description of the video.
I'm going to go into a little different topic around authenticity and humility because I do this segment purely for Dan Norton. No, not at all. So Dan, you just listen because this is important for you, but it's not, because your mind is more analytical, and so you won't get into any of these unnecessary states of being. So there's a lot going on right now in the world with mental illness, depression. I read a post today by somebody who's well known in the hobby saying, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to live. I can't climb out of this no matter what. There's no good news. As a young guy, but somebody who's got some level of maturity and wisdom and experience in life, what do you have to say about that? Like, I feel so bad when I read that stuff. It's not just one person. I read it and you can see the underlying vibes. Is it, what do you think that's from? Is there anything more we can do as a community to support these folks? Because, one day they're selling something and selling a bunch of cars. The next day it's like, I don't want to be here. And it really is troubling for me as a dad of, 8 and a grandparent of several, and, to be an old guy in this hobby and read this stuff and say, I just wish I could help more. And a lot of these folks say, don't even bother me. I'm just going through it myself, but they're certainly saying it because they're reaching out in some way.
I mean, it's a tough topic, obviously. There's not going to be a general answer necessarily. There's people with chemical imbalances and all kinds of stuff. Like, so to give you kind of at least a reference, because I've kind of talked about this before, my wife is a PhD level marriage family therapist. So like depression and like, that's more marital issues. But I mean, there's people who have severe chemical imbalances that are just therapy for the rest of their life, or is really all that can kind of maintain a constant state of like, okay, I'm still here. But if I'm talking generally, I would say the hard part for me when I see like, or when I hear you say like someone's like, I can't do this anymore, I can't keep going. I think that social media is definitely one of the biggest things, because where my brain goes, not that I don't have sympathy for whoever this individual is, but you took time to purposely type something out, to share it with social media, to bring attention to it, so people would. I don't want to. It's hard. I don't want to assume what their intentions were, but like I would assume to bring attention to you. So people would feel sorry for you and message you, and you could get those messages. My thing is truly depressed, like people, they recluse, they go back and they stay away from the world. They don't try to get the world to pay attention to their depression, usually from just the people that I've known who have struggled with mental illness, things like that. Overall, I mean, if I'm talking about better things, I mean, I think the two main things that I think of that have bettered my life in general, and we've all had ebbs and flows of, ups and downs in our lives. You stay alive long enough, it's just going to happen. So removing myself from social media in a personal level was like one of the best decisions ever, because you're not just sitting there doom scrolling. You're not getting to the point where you see all these people posting stuff and you start believing that it's real. I mean, whether you think it's actually making an impact on you, these companies literally, like, you are the product. That's why you don't pay for it. When you don't pay for something, you are the product. So you're literally being almost, I don't want to use the term brainwashed, but I can't think of anything better. Like, your behaviors are being affected by that. It's anytime you sit down with a meal and you go, wow, this meal looks amazing, and the first thing that goes in your head is like, I should take a picture. That's proof right there. So I think that social media definitely causes a lot of people to think their lives are a lot worse than they actually are. I think the other thing is too, is like diet. And like, a lot of people don't talk about that. Like, if you eat crappy food, you are going to feel crappy. Like, so if you're just literally like using, oh, I'm so busy, I'm just going to pound Doritos or like drink soda and like do whatever all the time, like, you're going to feel bad. So like, you have to kind of, I think if you can take care of and check some of these boxes and keep yourself healthy physically, and also like keep your mental health under control when it comes to social media, I think if you can just start with those two things and you still have a really, really intense problem, I think you should absolutely get some sort of levels checked or look at that. But I think also therapy is the biggest thing. Like, I've done personal therapy, not because I was on like rock bottom or anything, but I continue to see someone, every couple of weeks just to keep my sanity. Like, Dave, we're all married here. It's hard to complain to the same person constantly where they're like, I don't want to hear this anymore. It's nice to have a third party, like, just to kind of unload your stuff on and be able to discuss that on more of just a, non-judgmental level. And I will advocate for people, especially guys, because it's just not common for us to like accept therapy. Like, just go and talk your stuff out. You feel so much better. And I literally did that for, personal growth, professional growth, like, just for me to be in a good level headset to say, like, it's okay to like feel these things, and it's not looked down upon or you're not just complaining, like, you're just trying to share the issues with your life and understand them better. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I would say those three things: delete your social media if you can, as best as you can, or at least take a 30-day hiatus from it. Don't even look at it. Your diet is huge. And then, just mental health, like therapy. If you can afford therapy, you should be just doing it just because. Don't wait for rock bottom. Like, you will see an impact in your life and feel so much better if you're able to do that. And I think that with all the issues going on, I think it's because people are neglecting those three things primarily.
And
long rant,
people will
answers that.
People will notice that my social media has been empty for the last couple of weeks, rather than me posting and just complaining about all of the stuff that's been going on. It's been a rough couple of weeks on my end, and just stepping away from stuff. Like, David, you messaged me and was like, hey Dan, I know we haven't done a podcast in a while, why aren't you doing your usual opening videos? And I was like, I just needed, like, obviously I lost a lot of work with the laptop issue, but I could have like just jumped back in and started doing videos again and stuff, but I was just like, I just need a couple of weeks between that, and we've had our dogs in a rough shape. Like, I've started listing some of my PSA 10s for sale because I was on the fence about selling those anyway, and now it's like, oh, this poor bugger needs some surgery. So it's just been like, it's funny. Yes, I don't want to post Pokemon stuff right now. It was like, I need a couple of weeks. And
not to cut you off, but that's like a prime example of, like, you felt these feelings, so you pulled away from it. You reclused yourself. So, like, thinking about, like, I can't take it. Like, if you were gone, you were like, I can't take this anymore, guys. Like, please, like, I don't know. I just see a difference in that behavior where yours is a little bit more of like what I would expect. Yeah. So like that kind of goes into that social media topic. But
yeah, if you want to read my crazy ramblings when I go manic, you have to subscribe to my Patreon.
Yeah, that's great. So it always turns back to that.
It's not even a joke. There is genuinely some horrific stuff on there. If you want to delve back into it, I did use Patreon. Patreon's more of a Patreon's more of a diary than just like Instagram. On Patreon, it's like, if you want to pay $1 a month, I'll tell you how I really feel about situations and people.
Laura has had, his wife, Colt, has had so many medical issues. I can't even begin to tell you. Not once would he have sold one of his tens to help her with the financial aspect, but the dog, the little bugger that needs surgery, that's when the stuff gets sold. I make sure she doesn't watch a thing on here, because I am disappointed in you wholeheartedly. And dye the hair more pink, because I miss the old, more flashy color. Colt, this
Her
is
medical issues have
absolutely
been
what?
her medical issues have been stuff where she's just been like in bed for a few days, and
I'm
has
just
been
teasing.
sick.
She's fine. She's got no
she's
medical
never,
issues.
she's
Half
never
three
needed
quarters of the
major
stuff I make up,
surgery.
I'm making up. I'm making the whole thing up, Dan. Don't listen to a thing I say. Nobody else does. Colt, fantastic advice. I had no idea what your wife did for a living. It's amazing. It's great. It dovetailed in perfectly. I would only add the following thing, and you said it in your own way. Is for those of you that are suffering at all, number one, prioritize your health. And you said that, Colt. It just, prioritize, because whether or not it's physical or mental or whatever, because if you do, then you're not afraid. Like I often feel like this is a really bad example, and this doesn't go. I'm older now, so I'm through the rough years, not that they don't happen in my age, but I'm through the rougher years I've had. And so, there are times I feel so much pressure as I continue to decide what's going to happen with this collection one day, because people all around me, my friends and clients, they're dying. They're dying. One by one, they're just dropping 50s and 60s and 70s. And so that gives me a sense of pressure because I have obligations to my family. And sometimes that pressure builds up and I'm like, I can't take this because I'm doing this and I'm trying to homeschool my son and we're trying to do this, whatever's going on. So I have to just step back and go, you know what? So I don't do any social media posting, or I don't sell something for a week or two or three or four, but I go back into myself and my family and regain that foundational ground, that stronghold, that footing. So you're not slipping down the canyon anymore. So, but I think it's really interesting when you said a lot of folks reach out, they not knowing what to do, almost for that attention. Maybe it's not so much real as it could or should be or might be. But I always say to those people, if it becomes real, you do need support. You need to reach out and not say, I can't tell you what it's about. You better start telling somebody what's it about. And that's a therapist or your significant other or somebody or anybody that can help you navigate through, because you are absolutely right. Social media has changed everything about this country and about people in this country and about emotions that we experience in such a short period of time. And because of how quick that's happened and is happening, folks really don't know exactly how to cope with it and when is the time to shut it all down, etc. So.
Well, what's also scarier is if you're young and you've grown up with it and you've lived in a world that you've never lived in a world without it. There are people alive who've lived in a world never without social media. You almost can't escape the way it makes you feel because you've never known the world without it affecting you, which is crazy to think about. Just the algorithms and the people and like the way people engage. I'm lucky enough to have started like from dial up, and then I got like invited to join Facebook because I was in high school and like a college person invited me. I was like, oh, so cool. Like I lived through and was a part of all of that. But I could never be swayed like a 16-year-old now can. That's why I think we see such a spike now, especially young people. It's like everybody has a condition now. Everybody's depressed or anxiety or blah, 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 blah. But it's like, it's hard to sift through what's a real, and not that I don't want to put it out there that I'm like questioning these people who reach out for help, because I agree with you, Dave. I think if you got to find some support. Maybe that's the only way those people know how to do it, like is online and through social media, because that's what they've seen. But I think the thing is, it's hard to sift through like the real, true people who are depressed, because the behaviors that we've seen historically do not match up with the way that people are so expressive and ready to share it now. And it's like, that's so different. And I think that sure, culture changes, but I think the way that we react to those type of conditions or feelings or that tends to be a constant, I would imagine. But again, sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of like when you talk about how you would expect people more to move away from social media rather than make these posts of, oh, I'm feeling depressed, I'm having these feelings. We are in there is a situation where people who are very, very active on social media, especially if it's tied to their livelihood, like people who make their living doing YouTube and stuff like that, they can't just take the break with no message because their viewers feel that they have the right to know. I'm sort of paraphrasing what someone else. There's a podcaster I listen to a lot called Ian Boldsworth. He does a lot of stuff on his Patreon. He does a lot of podcast stuff about. He's a comedian, but he talks about mental health and stuff a lot. He's described it as people have such an entitlement to information at all times right now that, like, say there's someone like, say, Leon Hart. If Leon Hart just decided to stop posting on social media for 2 weeks, he would be getting thousands of messages of where are you, where are you, where are you. He couldn't just take that step away. He would have to go on and make some sort of public statement. Like, you do see it when it is especially bigger amongst YouTubers and stuff, where if they need to take a mental health break from social media, they first have to do that last post. They have to do that last video explaining why there's going to be that break. I mean, I know I said I stepped away. I did do a short video on my channel, like, just explaining where I was going, like, why there was going to be no videos for a couple of weeks, because if not, it leads to there being more demand for engagement. I know I'm obviously on a much, much smaller level than some of these other people, but
I get what you're saying, though.
Yeah, it would just lead to there'd be way more pressure and way more anxiety and stuff inducing from that if they don't make that post, because their viewers and stuff, a lot of them will feel entitled to know, oh, I'm your viewer, I'm the reason you have wages, I'm the reason you can do this. I have the right to know why there's no video. I have the right to know what's going on in your life. I think that's a big thing for a lot of people too, is just they want to get that message out there of, like, this is what's happening. Please don't question me about this anymore. Because
I guess there's different ways that people, I guess, and again, there's not one. We're probably all right here, like, just bringing up all these examples. But from my experience of people who I know who've been, like, clinically depressed, apathy is, like, one of the number one things. It's why, like, traditionally they sleep all day. Like, they wouldn't even necessarily feel the anxiety of having to, like, be questioned about it, because they're so separated and apathetic toward, like,
the words
life
are,
in general.
I don't care. I mean, there's lots of times I just, like, my wife will look at me and she'll say something and I go, honey, I do not care. And it's just, you're going through that 2 or 3 day period when everything's hitting you the wrong way. And you're like, just isn't the time. I don't care. What, when somebody wants you to respond and they heighten the level of, argumentative, whatever it is, anybody. And you're like, I can't, I don't care. So that's that apathy you're talking about that drives you away. Yeah.
Or it couldn't get any worse. And, like, you almost, like, subconsciously test that, because then you start to feel something. Usually, like, people who are depressed, they don't feel, they feel, but it's like they're very numb to things. So, like, even the anxiety inducing, like, where are you? Like, it's almost like stepping back and leaning into that I don't care. That's also a way for them to kind of feel, oh, people might want me back. I don't know. And again, we could slice that like 1,000 different ways, but just from my experience, usually true apathy, like, in its purest form, is what I've seen. But again, I could be wrong. I'm not a YouTuber. It's a grueling job, and social media pays your bills. Like, whoever does that, like, I get that those type of people, like, are going to probably have to experience that differently. But if it's truly to the level that I've seen it, which could be just maybe a more severe degree, those people tend to just disappear, and they don't care what those repercussions are, because they don't care about anything.
So I have no idea. We'll have to figure out if he actually keeps us on or not, Colt, because he can edit all this out at this point. So
I'm enjoying it either way. I mean, these are heavy topics, but
we might have finally found something that's actually meaningful to more folks, the Pokemon community and the rest of the world as a whole. But we don't really need Dan for it. We'll just maybe have him, we'll give him a small stipend to film, and you and I can just keep talking. I kid you, Dan. I know you're listening now while you're editing. Just keep it in. People want to know. Colt, what, you talk about selling and stuff, and that I don't know. Where do you sell? Where do people find you? and your merchandise? Is it eBay? Are there other places? Are you on Facebook? How do people find you for what it is that you're maybe able to offer in value in the Pokemon community as far as merchandise?
eBay is the primary at this point. I'm trying to grow that presence by selling as much as I can on there. And also I think they just do it the right way. They have authenticity guarantee. Like I've never had, any issues when it comes to returns, scammers, anything like that. And I've got, I don't know how many things I've sold. Like it's in the hundreds, I think now. But that's primarily where everything is. If people message me like directly, I used to post a lot of my stuff on Instagram. Hey, this is for sale, and I do that for brokered cards for other people who maybe have high end stuff they just want to get a audience or eyeballs on. But for my own stuff, like unless it's something, fairly expensive, like maybe over 1,000, like I'll post it on Instagram and say like, hey, DM me if you want to purchase this. Most of the stuff I'm selling is going to be $600 or less, and that stuff is all going to eBay immediately because I think it gets eyes on the other stuff and just people buy it. So PeekDatChu on eBay if people want to find it. I find eBay is very difficult to find users on a lot of the time, but if you type in my name, I think it will pop up.
I think you have to go to advanced settings, and then you go and you type in a seller name, PeekDatChu, and that way they can find you that way, because I've always struggled with that as well. How many listings? Do you have any idea how many listings you have on eBay right now, just roughly?
Not a ton. There's probably 75 items on there because what I do is whenever I wait for cards to come back, I've probably got more now, but I'll get grading orders back, and all those go on eBay as soon as the images are available because PSA does the scans of the cards. So as soon as those are ready, I just download those. I put them on because PSA ships to me within from the moment I get images, I usually get the cards within about 4 days. So if I put something up for a buy it now or I put something up for auction, by the time those have sold, I'm getting cards like in hand maybe 2 days after they bought it at most, and then I just ship it out from there. But I've got like 3 or 4 grading orders, so probably like 70 graded cards that are coming back over the course of the next month, and those are just all funneled directly into eBay. So, because usually if there's anything I'm moving
on Facebook before ever,
yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Back when I had it, it was. I mean, what I did not enjoy necessarily about that is the amount of. There were 2 things. I know what I have when I was on the buying end, and the amount of low balls that I got from people on Facebook just drove me absolutely insane. I would sit there and go back and forth, and we would talk and talk and talk, do it for hours in a day, and then they would just ghost me and not buy. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't deal with these non-serious, like they're not ready to buy, or if they are, they're like, I'm buying at 40%. It's like, why am I even on here? Like, this doesn't make it. Like, if I can just throw it on eBay, even with the fees, I could at least net like 85, 90, And yeah, I did Facebook for a while. I still do private deals through Instagram. That's usually where most people find me anyway. But I've left the Facebooks behind, and I've funneled almost everything through eBay unless somebody DMs me directly and says, hey, do you have this card? And I go, oh, actually, yeah, I've got a copy. Let's just work something out.
So one more question on Instagram then, because one of the reasons, people ask me what is the priority in social media posting for me on Instagram right now. And just being very transparent, it's because I have a lot of extra stuff that I need to liquidate before I pass away on this earth. And so the more that I can raise that following, and my son, who has a snake business, has got tons and thousands of followers, because any kind of animal people follow. So, if I can get those numbers up, and I envision myself going to Instagram at some point and saying, hey, I've got a Skyridge box available. Anybody interested, come to me directly, blah, blah, blah. Is that okay? Is that doable? Is that an allowable?
Oh, for sure. You could do that today, Dave. Like that,
Okay.
I mean, I'm referencing that particular product for sure, but I mean, you might get it's actually probably more difficult the more followers you have, because I've always kind of really enjoyed being able to, especially like the amount of people you follow, which is beneficial to you. You only follow like 10 people or something, but people who can enter your general inbox versus your I forget what it's called, like your business inbox, or maybe it's like your actual inbox, then general is like all the other people. Because posting that to thousands of people, you're going to get probably 100+ messages of people wanting to buy it from you. But it's nice to be able to have people you've already connected with reach out, because realistically, we know a lot of the same people. Sealed product, especially high-end sealed product, there's a there's like 20 people, if I had a box like that I'd sell to, and that's probably on the top end. Anybody else who just threw me random offers, it's like, I'm
Waste
not,
of time.
you know, oh my gosh, yeah, I don't need half market price right now. Like, I'm not that desperate, especially on a box like that. Or you know, people may even tell you like, yeah, I'll give you asking, but if you don't know them, it's like, okay, well, how are you paying me again? Like,
Right.
where are you meeting me? It can be weird, you know. So,
It's Bitcoin in the gas station bathroom. Yeah, it's just so you know how most of that stuff comes in. So, all right, good. No, that's good to know. I know I don't want to keep you on anymore. Dan will keep you on all night, and that's not fair. So, Dan, we did speak right through the bathroom break, and we appreciate you allowing us to do that. Don't edit it out. We're an hour and 5 minutes in. I'm going to shut up now. I really am. I'm going to say thank you to you, Colt, for just the kindness of coming on with us. You know, I've known you just, you know, in passing for a lot of years, but you know how much respect I have for you. And it's just so nice, like you said, from a community to be able to hear you talk and speak and understand how articulate and knowledgeable you are, and just get to know more about you. So I hope everybody will do that and come and look for you and partake of your wisdom as well. But Dan, would you like to say anything now that the bladder is empty?
No, I think we touched on a lot of the topics I was expecting to, and then some topics that I guess I was not expecting to. So just a huge thanks to Peek for joining us. It ended up being a very, very relevant guest booking, I guess, talking about the therapy and mental health issues and stuff right after my couple of weeks break. Didn't expect to go down that route, but hey, hopefully people enjoy this episode. I'm already knowing I'm going to have to go back and just film a very slight content warning to put in the middle of the video, like, okay, at this point, we maybe stop talking about Pokemon for a bit. If you viewer discretion is advised from this point on, I'll actually put that in. But yeah, thanks for joining us. Anything you want to promote? Anything else you want to shout out? Peek, obviously we talked about your Instagram, your YouTube. Everything will be in the description. But is there anything else you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, really, most recent thing, I just had a live stream with 3 great guys, Jim at Pokemon, Leon Hart, Charlie Herlocker, just maybe a week or 2 ago or something. It's on my YouTube channel. That's the most recent thing I've done. I've got some other stuff up and coming that I'll be doing on YouTube a little bit more. I'm trying to at least get once a month. I'm not okay. Hold on. I'm not trying to like, oh, I'm consistent, I'm going to be posted. No, but in my mental brain, in the back of it, I'm like, I could do once a month. Like, I can get some people on and have some good conversations. And just know, like, I'm not a consistent YouTuber at all. If you want to interact with me at all, Instagram's the best way because that's what I'm most active on. It's just easy for me. Nothing really promotion. I love the podcast, guys. Again, Coffee Talk. I've been shouting you guys out since day one. I was like, oh my gosh, they're actually doing it. This is great. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. And this has been one of the most enjoyable conversations, just topic wise and how we've gone back and forth. And, you know, Dan, great to talk to you for the first time. Dave, always good catching up with you. I know, you know, we could go 6 hours long on this thing probably, and we'll save the viewers, you know, that
yeah, it is also midnight for me. I guess 11 for you and 9 for Dave, so it is not an early recording.
And anybody that knows me, they know what's coming up because I can't eat during the day at all because the system don't work. So the pizza's waiting at home. I just got to go there. My apologies for the background as always. Whenever we have a guest, I will not do it at home because I will not have any internet disruptions. Someone like Colt is too important and I respect him too much to put him through any of that. So I will be driving home now and I'm sure we'll have you on again. I'll be very candid with you. I knew this was late. I didn't know how long it was going to go. And I said to Dan beforehand, I said, do you have a certain amount of time? Because these tend to go long. And he said, an hour 30 is good. If it flows, we'll go longer. But I had no idea, Colt, that you were going to be this amazing. And so it truly flowed. And I think people are going to want to hear a lot more from you in the future. And so hopefully we'll be able to have you on again. But I have total respect for you and I can't thank you enough again.
Yeah, appreciate you guys. Thank you.
I guess if any of the listeners have, follow-up questions or any more questions for Colt, if you leave them in the comments to this video as well, I'm sure he will be looking through the comment section at some point can drop some responses and stuff down there too.
I do come back. I am one that actually comes back, I promise. So I can't stand that when you ask questions for the guests and then they just never show up in the comment section. It's like, yes, I will come read this stuff for sure.
Yeah. All right, well, I guess that's going to be it from all of us for today. Hopefully the next episode is just going to be me and David. I think hopefully we can get some time to do a proper episode because me and David need a bit of a catch-up. I think it's been about a month, bit over a month now since we've had an episode with just me and David catching up on the status of his collection and purchases and stuff. So hopefully one of those before too much longer. But thank you all for watching. We do all, as always, hugely appreciate the support. Leave us some comments. Check out our Instagrams and stuff too. And we will see you all again very soon.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.